Good evening, everyone. Attention. Thank you. Welcome. Please rise as the academic procession enters the venue. Please rise. Thank you. I invite you to remain standing, please. I'm waiting for the cue for the national anthem. Hopefully it will start soon, but please remain standing. You may be seated. Colleagues, students, friends, honored guests, a warm welcome. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to this evening's inaugural lecture, the first in the 2025 series of inaugural lectures in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. My name is Jonathan Judamis. I'm the newly appointed Acting Deputy Dean of Research and Postgraduate Studies in the faculty. And this is officially day 6 on the job. And already they've put me to work. But what better way to begin than with an academic rite of passage such as this? An inaugural lecture is one of the most meaningful rituals in university life. It's a moment of public reflection, a chance for a scholar to pause and share the questions and commitments that have shaped their academic journey. It's also a time and a rare moment when those of us who usually speak in strange academic tongues are asked to explain ourselves in plain language. It's the one event where family and friends are finally able to sit back and say, so that's what you do. I, for one, am looking forward to delivering mine one day, if only so my family can stop thinking that I'm a glorified post office worker. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Tonight's lecture is especially meaningful. It invites us into a space of creativity and a space of deep reflection. And this is really important in a higher education landscape that is often increasingly driven by outputs and performance indicators. I think it's both necessary and maybe even quietly radical to make room for uncertainty, for imagination, and as Professor Moolman puts it, for poetic unknowing. And that is exactly what we are here to do this evening. So before we continue, please allow me to acknowledge those who will guide us through this evening's program. Professor Monwabisi Khalakhala, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, who will officially welcome us in just a moment. Professor Fiona Muller, our newly minted Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Professor Sally Ann Murray, our respondent, whose scholarly engagements with Professor Moolman has been a meaningful conversation partner for quite some time. And then Professor Mantwa Motanyani, our Deputy Dean of Learning and Teaching, who will deliver the vote of thanks. So a very warm welcome to all colleagues, students, and guests from our partner institutions, and especially to Professor Moolman's family and friends. Can I get an indication by hand? Family and friends, there we go. There are quite a few of them. Oh, welcome, a warm welcome especially to you this evening. Your presence here is greatly appreciated. So to officially open this evening's proceedings, then, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Monwabisi Khalakhala, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic. Professor Khalakhala, over to you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Judamus. Looking at the room, I'm sure it will fill up with time. Esteemed guests, colleagues, and friends, good evening. I think it's early evening, Prof. Yes, early evening. Well, thank you very much for gracing this event with your presence this evening. And I'm sure your presence here is highly appreciated, especially in honor of our own Professor Kobus Moolman. Let me also take the opportunity to acknowledge all of you this evening. But first and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge Professor Moolman, you the man of the moment this evening, but also Miss Julia, wife to Professor Moolman. Perhaps, ma'am, you can just raise your hand so that we see you. Thank you very much. I would like to acknowledge you on behalf of the University of the Western Cape. Chair, it will be remiss of me not to give due recognition to the leadership of the faculty in support, of this occasion. It is important that we say a word or two about them. Of course, starting with Professor Muller, who's our new dean, started in 1st of August. Yes, you're right. Prof, we acknowledge you as well as our new leader in the faculty. And of course, Professor Nadar was sitting somewhere. Yeah, so who had to hold the fort, during the recruitment and selection process. And we also want to give thanks to you, Prof. I also wish to make a special mention of the Deputy Dean, Prof. Mutinyane, who's also serving as our Deputy Dean Learning and Teaching. Prof, we acknowledge you. And of course, our newborn, acting Deputy Dean Research and Postgraduate Studies, Professor Judamus, who's also, hitting their ground running, as they say. So we wish to acknowledge the leadership for supporting this event. Thank you very much. The presentation of inaugural lectures is a tradition at UWC, as it has been pointed out in so many of these occasions. And of course, the lecture follows the university conferring the title or the status of full professor on an academic. It is a moment on which academic peers, colleagues, friends, family, and of course the university community and the public celebrate the intellectual and scholarly achievement of one of our professors, as pointed out by Professor Judamas. Now, therefore, this evening is a celebration that marked that milestone in honor of Professor Moolman. I think as I was going through some of, the information, and I came across something quite interesting about Professor Moolman, and a statement was made to say he's one of South Africa's prolific poets and a deeply respected teacher. And I think that really struck me. And William Ward puts it so nicely, I quote, "The mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, and of course, the great teacher inspires." And I want to believe that Prof. Moolman is one of our inspirations in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities for the longest time. So, Prof, we wish to thank you and congratulate you for your work, for your contribution, but also for your inspiration. And the people around here are here tonight just to witness, some of your contributions as you will be reflecting on your scholarly work. Colleagues, friends, without further ado, as the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic of the University of the Western Cape, I hereby declare this inaugural lecture titled "The Inside Crystal of Things, Reflections on the Pedagogy of Poetic Practice," to be presented by Professor Kobus Moolman open. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Khala, for officially opening this auspicious occasion. Before I welcome Prof. Mula, who's going to be making the way for Prof. Moolman to finally address us, I want to mention something. So just last week we had Arts High Degrees meeting, and afterwards I ran into Prof. Kobus, and I said to him, "Hey, Prof, I'm actually going to be the program director, and I'm a little bit nervous." And he said, "Oh, no worries. I've been working on my lecture, and I had to ruffle up the pages and throw it out." And I said to him, "Oh, Prof, I think that we can expect some fireworks, some magic." And he said, "Well, I surely hope so." So this evening, I think that the magic will be presented. Prof. Fiona Muller, to introduce Prof. Moolman officially, please, Prof. Muller.
So yes, firstly, to thank Prof. Khala for acknowledging me as the new Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. The shoes I step into are just way too big, and this gown also is way too large, and I'm hoping over the years to grow into it. So thank you for that. So, I thought of introducing Prof. Kobus Moolman in the usual way by running through his biography and through listing all of his achievements. But his achievements are too many, and in any case, you can have a look at what they are on his website. But I am going to touch on a couple of them in what I say. So I thought it would be better for me to introduce Prof. Kobus Moolman through telling you about what he has meant to me. So I've known Prof. Kobus Moolman for about 10 years. In the period that he has been my colleague, he has always been the same. Being the same may suggest that someone is uninteresting, dull, unexciting. But in the case of Kobus, being the same means that without exception in my interactions with him, he has always been calm, composed, unassuming, patient, circumspect, sensitive, and more concerned about others than with himself. Kobus has faced great challenges all of his life, and in the past year and a half, these challenges have intensified beyond what any average person should have to bear. But Kobus is not average. He faces these challenges with exceptional and enviable strength and endurance. He is tested, but no test is too hard for him to bear. But Kobus presents an unrippled surface beneath which great currents of emotion and powerful expression flow, intimated only when one reads his work. These undercurrents operate at many levels, impacting also the forms, modes, and style of his writing. His work, what can one say about his work? Kobus is a writer of many talents. He's a poet, a playwright, a short story writer, and a scholar. His publications, as I've already said, are too many to mention, as are the awards he's received. But I'll name just a few that I consider to be really significant. So I've heard Kobus read for students and staff from his collection, A Book of Rooms. The effect on the audience at that reading was palpable. This collection was the winner of the Glenna Luce Prize for African Poetry in 2016 and was shortlisted for a National Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences Award in the same year. His collection, Separating the Seas, was the winner of the South African Literary Award for Poetry in 2010. Another collection, Time Like Stone, was the winner of the Ingrid Jonker Poetry Award in 2000. And in 2013, Kobus was the winner of the Sol Plaatje European Union Poetry Award. There's no tribute, I believe, greater than the tribute of another practitioner. Kelvin Soul, another great South African poet, confirms the power of Kobus's poetic voice and tries to explain it by suggesting that his work shows a consistent and powerful inclination to explore new ground in both form and content. An even greater tribute is that the poet, Kelvin Soul, then explains the nuance of Kobus's work, not in his own words, but by resorting to Kobus's words in an interview. So Kelvin Soul allows Kobus to tell us what constitutes the distinctiveness of his writing. And this is what Kobus says about his work. He says, writing is a process that requires attentiveness, attending to, being alert to several, many things at the same time, the world around me, the observable world, the world of nouns, but also being alert to the inner what? Not inner world, but something that suggests activity, action, happening, movement, the inner movements. Kobus's reflection on his writing shows how his writing is an exploration of practice in many different senses of that word. One of these forms of practice is expressed in his teaching of creative writing and his supervision of creative writing MA and PhD theses. Just under 40 postgraduate students have been or are currently being supervised or mentored by Kobus. Kobus's students achieve an exceptional rate of success in publication, and his talents are expressed through the development of the talents of his students, who also go on to win awards as he has. The success of his protégés includes the 2021 Eugene Marais Poetry Award conferred upon Jolyn Phillips, and the 2021 NIHSS Poetry Book Award for Musa Kanyile, who in addition got the 2020 South African Literary Award for Poetry, among the many achievements of his other students. In his work with students at UWC, Kobus also engages and extends what it means for UWC to be the University of the Left. He says in the introduction to an edited volume of poetry by students, so he's edited this volume, and it's a volume called Cutting Carrots the Wrong Way, Poetry and Prose About Food from the University of the Western Cape Creative Writing Program. So this is what he says in the introduction, and this is the way in which he extends the meaning of what it is to be a student at UWC, which recognizes itself as being a university of the left. So this is what he says. He says, collating material for this collection, I was struck by how the writers are articulating an alternative notion of the term relevant. It is not that they eschew socio-political ideas. As part of a socially engaged institution of higher learning, students of UWC have an historical commitment to researching factors which inhibit socio-economic progress toward a more inclusive and equitable society. Rather, they are remaking the validity and consequence of the term by energizing it with their own personal contexts and voices. So Kobus expands the range of ideas and meanings of many things. Kobus's work also extends to community engagement, where he has done writing workshops with groups in prisons, schools, and community organizations. It is a really great honor for me to be able to refer to Kobus as my colleague, and we are privileged to have him coordinate one of the best creative writing programs in the country. In handing you over to Kobus for his inaugural lecture, I hope that his lecture will include readings from his works, because when Kobus reads his powerfully charged words, one is compelled not just to listen, but also to hear. Kobus, over to you.
I have absolutely nothing to say after all of that. I feel I'm... I'll be fine. Thank you so much. I don't know who that person was that was introduced there. I'd like to meet him, actually. Can you all hear me? I'm going to take a drink of water first before I start. I'm useless at remembering names. I'm useless at protocol. That doesn't mean that I don't respect I do, and I offer my gratitude and my heartfelt thanks. I greet you all, and I say thank you so much for being here this evening. I have no visual material to share, so you are going to have to just close your eyes and listen, if that's okay with you. There is but one beginning for him, sitting still, keeping to his still and stony ground, until something he has come to recognize as a beginning starts. And the beginning for him always starts in the necessity for not knowing. It starts in helplessness, in the helpless necessity for ignorance. Ignorance of knowing any what to do, ignorance of any knowing how to do it. The beginning for him always begins with one small word at a time. Here are two ways to begin with words. This one is by the American poet known as H.D. from her long poem, "The Walls Do Not Fall." We know no rule of procedure. We are voyagers, discoverers of the not known, the unrecorded. We have no map. The second way is by the Palestinian poet Zakaria Mohammed, who died in 2023, from his sequence entitled 8 Poems. The poem starts with desire. There is no idea, word, or rhythm, only a vague, nameless desire. Then you climb dark stairs as if they are not there or are yet to appear. You climb, fearing that you might trip and break your heel. But when you place your foot on the last step, light emanates. As if a shut door was suddenly flung to the sun, you see the stairs you climbed, the stairs you built. Then you come down happy to count the steps you made and climbed. But here is a further way he has discovered where to begin. His own incomplete, unsteady, broken way of the body, beginning with his eyes, doing what eyes do. They focus their spyglasses upon. With his ears, doing what ears do when there are no eyes. They overhear. Doing what the hand does when there are neither eyes nor ears. When there is only silence and darkness, the hand stretches toward, it feels for. For it is the cold, the rusted hand that is the he in all of his talking. His neck and his arm and his shoulder and his back and his knee and his foot and his mouth are all joined together at the claw. And in the old claw is a plain Bic ballpoint pen with a broken clip, always black. There is no other color for him now. But in the beginning it was blue, all that time ago. It was a fountain pen then, cheap and plastic. He has the pen still. It is in the top drawer of his old pine desk, the desk that has followed him everywhere, from when he first sat across his plain pine bed with his feet hanging over the side and his back up against the wall with the long crack in it, the crack that opened and closed depending on the weather. When he began, with the Croxley JD 6235 faint and margin, dof en kantlyn, 48 pages, 48 bladsye, open on his lap. Helpless, ignorant, not knowing. As he put his small foot upon that first dark step, the step that was not there until it was there, one dark step at a time, small broken step by broken step, the step that is more misstepping, stumbling, not stepping in the dark than triumph of will or triumph of insight, comprehension, or anything resembling achievement. But stop. Why does he talk of himself like this, as if he were a hand or a claw? Who is this he that says he, when in fact he means I? Why does he talk in this obscure, oblique fashion? Why does he talk in circles? Is it willful mystification? Or anti-intellectualism? What has this got to do with knowledge acquisition, knowledge production, and knowledge transfer? He stops again. I stop. I close my eyes. I cover my eyes with the palms of my slow hands. I take a deep breath. I say, this here, this way here, this way with my eyes covered by my two cold hands and my two hands looking down at each dark step, looking at the not there, then there. This way is the only way I know how to speak about that moment of lifting the foot and placing it down nowhere. That moment that Paul Celan in his 1960 speech, The Meridian, called a presence in the present. The only way I know how to speak about what I do not know about what I do know. Or is it the other way around? The only way for me to speak when I feel that strange, nameless desire to speak that Zakaria Muhammad spoke of earlier. To speak not about thinking or thinking about knowing, not about feeling even, but about the white, hot, ice-cold act of speaking itself, about words before they become things we know, about the always in process in the present moment of language going inward, stretching toward bringing into being of things, about poesis. And poesis in the Greek simply means making. To make a boat for crossing from here to there, from here where I am to there where I am not yet, to make a house for sheltering me from the cold when I get there, to make a bed so that I can close my eyes and rest my aching arms and legs and dream, to make an earthen cup for drinking wine, a stringed instrument for music, a pair of black boots for climbing step by step the invisible steps. A story even a poem. I began as a poet with a homework assignment when I was in Standard 6, sitting on my plain pine bed with my back up against the wall and my feet hanging over the side, and my school exercise book open on my lap, with a 4-page poem called The Eagle. I began as a poet, and although almost 50 years later, I still do not know what a poet actually is, that, as Louise Gluck says, it names an aspiration, not an occupation. Nevertheless, I do make and have made many things we call poems. I cannot do anything else. Cannot run, jump, climb, skip, hurry to the end of the sky, barely stand without falling over, because it is only the hand that holds me up, that holds me onto the narrow path where there are no handholds, only deep and empty falling. And so, unavoidably, it is about and it is from this elusive and incomplete yet disciplined kind of thinking knowing, which more often than not feels like the opposite of knowing, that I must speak to you tonight. For it is this paradoxical, hands-on, hands over the eyes knowing of HD's not known that I bring with me into the classroom. That I found in the end I must make this illogical, indirect, but always concrete and embodied method the basis of my pedagogy as Professor of Creative Writing in the Department of English Studies. It is always this in practice methodology, this presence of the fleshed out present that I endeavor to keep alive in the classroom. In room D238 of the English department, beneath the white humming light, around a very large table, so large there is barely space for the students to pull out their chairs before they hit the wall behind them. In lecture hall C6, where I perch myself precariously on the first row of raked desks, cautious about falling, yet knowing I am about and have to step into the unknown. It is this experience of thinking, speaking, and writing from within what Anne Carson, in her book, Economy of the Unlost, calls the inside crystal of things, that I have made the signature of my daily teaching across the various levels of creative writing modules and degrees within the arts faculty. Carson's inside crystal of things is by definition hard in all the implications of the word. It emphasizes what we could term the difficult imagination, returning us through complexity and challenge, not predictability and ease, to attention and contemplation. It insists on slowness and the long way round rather than the well-worn. And if it shines away, then it is not the predictable enlightenment we are taught to expect. That it is more of what D.H. Lawrence called a dark light. It is a complex approach. This inside turning back upon itself from within, upon the outside approach. It is like the paradox of a Möbius strip. It is made up of contradiction and instability and unpredictability and unfathomable risk, stepped upon those dark stairs of Zakaria Muhammad. It is defined by the indefinite, for it stands both within and without at one and the same time. It talks about the outside from the inside and vice versa. Am I confounding you? I'm confounding myself. For a method moved by the inside crystal of things accepts that it must talk in a confounding and convoluted language about that which has no language, or, to be more accurate, about that which is before language, before it comes into language. And of course it has to come into language, otherwise there is no thing, nothing to share as a teacher around that large table in D238. Nothing but good intentions. And good intentions have never got a writer anywhere. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Perhaps I should stop and rewind and start again. Start somewhere else. You could begin again, Joan Metlerkamp writes in her series poem, Points on Poems. You could begin again. There is not one point to a poem. It is always another point of departure. Try another point of departure. So perhaps try this one, by Jane Hirschfield, from her collection of lectures at Newcastle University, Hiddenness, Uncertainty, Surprise. People go looking for one thing, and they find another. Perhaps for something to be found, the only thing that matters is that there be searching. Certainly. That is the way in the writing of poems. It certainly is the way in the teaching of the writing of poems, because all poems, as Hirschfield continues, hold a knowledge elusive and multiple, unsayable in any other way. But here is another point of departure by Mary Shelley. In her author's introduction to the 1831 edition of Frankenstein, Shelley described her struggle to come up with her story idea. I thought and pondered vainly. I felt that blank incapability of invention, which is the greatest misery of authorship. But if this blank incapability is central, indispensable even, to creative writing, how then can it be taught? Especially in an institution of high learning where we are inevitably committed to teaching graduated capability and the structured acquisition of transferable skills, or to turn the challenge end up. How can the teaching of blank incapability in forms of creative writing teach the academy about different generative relationships between intellectual thought and creativity, about alternative ways of knowing. And here I'm thinking of the alternative methods of research described by Khabib Badarun as slow maturation, indirectness, vulnerability, and the unpredictable trajectory of creativity. Methodologies and processes which disrupt established hierarchies of knowledge and discourse, inviting a new, transformative relationship to institutionalized languages of power, relevance, and meaning. We stop again. We stand still. We turn around. We go backwards in order to go further forwards. Creative writing is a relatively new field in South African universities. Since its nascence at the Potchefstroom campus of the University of the Free State in 1985, it has grown across a range of institutions of higher learning in this country. This increase links creative writing to a worldwide trend which reflects its continuous growth as university subject and scholarly field. To complement the establishment of creative writing as a university subject, we have witnessed over the past decades a burgeoning of international professional organizations, conferences, and scholarly publications in a range of aspects related to this field. More recently, following international benchmarks, South African universities have achieved, not without complication and dispute, of course, the accredited recognition by the DHET of published creative writing and related practice-based research as knowledge outputs. Creative writing clearly is being recognized as valid, critical, and philosophical scholarship in its own right. But because of its institutional newness, the teaching of this field is still relatively under-researched in our local institutions, and therefore misunderstood. In some ways, this is due to its uneasy straddling of the academic and the practical, caught between its dual incarnations as art form and academic discipline, between what Jean McNeill from the University of East Anglia called literary knowledge and literary practice. It might perhaps even be because of the still latent suspicion that imaginative production cannot be taught. Despite the long-established models of fine art, music, and theater, there is still that vague waft in the higher air of higher education that creative writing is the self-indulgent, overly emotional second cousin to literary and cultural studies, that it is an easy or soft option. Creative writing, some academics seem to believe, should become more like what we can recognize already: critical thought, abstract theory, empirical knowledge. It should become less and not more autonomous and distinct. But the inescapable, defining characteristic of creative writing in the university context is that it is a practice-led discipline. This means that, as Graham Mort from Lancaster University argues, by its very compositional nature, over time, It is concerned with what is unwritten or in process. This is a key distinction from other academic disciplines, such as literary studies, that are not concerned with the process of writing, but with its end result. It is worth standing still a moment and allowing this crucial epistemological distinction to sink in. Allow me to quote Jean McNeill again. Literary criticism and its more expansive parent, literary theory, requires a conscious analysis of an existing text. This gives us the most obvious difference between the rhetoric of creative writing and that of literary criticism. Literary theory and critique is applied after the fact. Creative writing presupposes its own definition. It deals with work that is emergent, in progress. It does not yet know what it is. Dwell on that crucial last sentence. It does not yet know what it is. Creative writing is a knot of potentialities, experiments, and explorations. And what I am increasingly interested in as teacher, researcher, and writer is exploring and defending the ways in which a knowing use of not knowing, the phrase belongs to Philip Gross, can be integrated into an approach to creative writing pedagogy and wider practice-based research. As all writers and artists have experienced, to create is to follow, not to lead. Even when we imagine we are leading, it is to follow something that does not yet exist. To follow it is to follow it as it is coming into existence. To make it up as it is being made up. Here is Helene Sissou from her book, 3 Steps on the Ladder of Writing. The thing that is both known and unknown, the most unknown and the best unknown. This is what we are looking for when we write. We go toward the best unknown thing, where knowing and not knowing touch, where we hope we will know what is unknown. To teach writing, therefore, is to teach someone what it is like to follow something that wants to be something but does not yet exist. So in the writing workshop, we are trying to teach a student how to follow this no thing in their writing in order to find out what their writing is trying to be. Does this make sense? How does this make sense? How does one do this? It is to teach someone how to make something out of nothing when they are expected so often to already have something in front of them. An argument, a thesis, a quantifiable methodology. And to teach someone how to do this day after day, enduring daily, what Stephen Watson described as blank beginnings, false starts, accumulations of ideas and images that seem only to increase the initial sense of mess and chaos, not to mention that feeling of being perpetually in a beginner's class. Ah, you say, we are going round in circles. We keep circling the same ideas, the same words. I avow instead that we are drawing nearer by drawing further away. Always the associative mode of speaking, always the elliptical, the open-minded, the open-ended language and attitude. So, I stop once more. I close my eyes. I cover my eyes with the palms of my slow hands. I take a deep breath. In his poem, Always Again, Jacques Coetzee writes, "The first and last discipline is to be empty enough to pay attention." Here we hear a hint, a clue. The clue lies in the word attention. The etymology of the word attention is revealing. The core of the word lies in the Latin verb attendere, which implies a physical or mental stretching or directing of oneself towards something. The Latin word is made up of ad, meaning to or toward, and tendere, meaning to stretch. So what we are encountering now is how Celan's idea of the presence of the present is stretching, taking a step further upon those dark stairs. But to and towards what? That we'll have to leave out for the moment. I rewind to the discipline of the somatic that I'd spoken of so earlier, and spoken of so mysteriously earlier. I rewind to the eye and the ear and the skin of the skin. In his letter to Augustus Hesse in 1818, John Keats wrote, "The genius of poetry cannot be matured by precept, but by sensation and watchfulness." And Jon Fosse, the Norwegian playwright and novelist, said in an interview, "I usually compare writing with listening. I don't know exactly what I'm listening for, but I listen anyway." So the practice of teaching writing is the practice of renewing the difficult skill of attention. Attention to the sound and the shine of the inner crystal of things. It is teaching the act and the discipline of listening and thinking differently. Because the language of literature always is an otherwise language. I return to Celan. A poem is something that listens, not without fear, for something beyond itself, beyond words. This approach is what Donald Hall described as inside person talking to inside person. And this listening and stretching towards these sounds from the inside is exactly the thing that can be taught. It involves being in two minds, inside and out, of being indecisive, of being prepared to risk failure. I go back to Keats. In his famous letters to his brothers in 1817, he described this condition as negative capability. But remember Mary Shelley's idea of blank incapability? Keats explained negative capability in the following way, as when a poet is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact or reason. But this uncertainty is not to be misinterpreted as a fear of commitment. The impulse of the double negative is not stasis. It is instead a way of preserving silence and making space for the not known. And it is woven into the very architecture of a poem. Marianne Boruch comments on the function of the line in poetry. There's no other place in our literary forms where one can speak and then take back for an instant what was said. This holding off, then, in order to listen, is a way to allow the mysteries and the as yet unrecognized, unconscious combinations of language to interrupt habit. I am reminded here of Viktor Shklovsky's famous definition of art as defamiliarization. The technique of art, Shklovsky wrote, is to make objects unfamiliar. To make objects, to make forms difficult. To increase the difficulty and the length of perception. In other words, to increase the reach or the stretch of perception beyond the thoughtlessly habituated. This is a provocative way of teaching students to listen through existing forms. The phrase belongs to Kathleen Fraser from a book, Translating the Unspeakable. One begins to understand that the established forms one is born into, the well-designed structures that precede, protect, and guide, may limit and even harm the ability to listen for an interior prompt of different. The emphasis here is upon reimagining the creative writing workshop as a space for individual experimentation and risk-taking that enables new, diverse modes of textual exploration and meaning effects. This experimental pedagogic practice, Fraser continues, privileges partial knowledge and fragmentary perception as valid and valued evidence. Erin Murray, the Canadian poet, in her collection of essays, My Beloved Wager, stretches this idea towards a fundamental re-envisioning of what she termed that droll old structure, the self. Challenging the self, she writes, leads to seeing where self is constructed, recognizing where thought's wires act as stop signs. Challenging the self is learning to walk past those wires, learning that the borders in one's thoughts are but seams. There's cloth past them too, and fields, light, birds. In this way, the teaching of the practice of poetry can become a radical strategy for renewal. Beginning with our universities, it can become a strategy for transforming institutional systems of exclusion and dominance. This is germane to the pedagogic practice of creative writing itself, and must surely be a way of nurturing and enriching South African literature. And to do this by stimulating writing that uses whatever forms and languages are necessary for people to recognize themselves, tracing the increasingly hidden connections to their sources of exploitation, making us take imaginative leaps away from ourselves in order to get closer to ourselves. The specific research value of teaching the writing of poetry, then, lies not in the knowledge contained within a poem or in the acquisition of predetermined skills. It lies in the significance in restoring value to words and to validating individual experience and subjectivity, and urgently so in the contemporary global resistance to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Its value lies in the questioning, in the destabilizing of boundaries, borders, and definitions. It lies in the value of practice as a generator of new not known. And finally, for me, the most profound and the most beautiful aspect of these not knowns is that they return us to our fundamental human element. These not knowns cannot be known by any machine intelligence. Machine intelligence is compelled to always know everything. Its hubris is insatiable. So too is its drive towards speed and efficiency. But not knowing is slow. It is disturbing, not placatory. It is irreplaceably human and fleshed out. Not knowing cannot be imitated or commodified. Mxolisi Nyezwa, one of my favorite poets, concludes, "Poetry is the antithesis to death, enlivening our actions and our experiences of existence to achieve a new sense of meaning. It is the duty of poetry to keep everybody alive." Thank you. Thank you all. Bless you. Am I allowed to collapse now?
Not just yet.
Oh, thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, cool.
Wow. So I said earlier that the magic was coming, and I think that we were all in awe. And you could attest, Prof. Moolman, by that rousing applause. We will still have time for a response from Prof. Shelley and Murray. So for now, you're still welcome to just take a seat. Yes.
Okay.
No problem. Wow. Thank you, Professor Moolman, for that profound and deeply moving lecture. And my mind is abuzz with so many things. You opened up by saying, close your eyes and listen. The unknowing, not knowing, looking at the not there, thinking knowing, a dark light, stepping into the unknown, blank incapability, unpredictability, paradox, the indefinite. And at the end there, what I really appreciated, if you really listened carefully, was that poetic critique of AI. I heard that. It didn't go unnoticed. You've reminded us that poetry is not a luxury. It is indeed central to how we make sense of ourselves and our capacity to imagine differently. And if a university cannot make space for that kind of work, then we must ask, what kind of education is it offering? Thank you so much. I'm not the respondent, so I won't go there. I do want to introduce to you the respondent to the lecture. We are delighted to welcome Professor Shelley and Murray to offer a response. Prof. Murray.
Thanks. Oh, I wish there was some light here. We've had enlightenment, but light is another story. I was just so happy to hear somebody from the back say, "We love you, Prof." Because I think I want to start, it's a little bit oddly, but I want to start just by reaffirming love in this room. Speak to the mic. Things happen. Okay, so I want to start by bringing love into the room, because that is what I feel for Kobus. Kobus, a long-standing friend, colleague, associate. We go way back to UKZN. He is in my life a kind of a poetic companion. We occasionally have conversations. These are not regular, they're rather ad hoc. But nevertheless, he's got free room in my mind space for a whole lot of reasons. I think because, for one, as should be evident from the talk that he's given, he is a very generous person. He is generous in his reading, generous in his affections for such a wide range of approaches, without wanting to fix knowledge in forms of narrow certainty that can actually only cause us harm, as we do see in the world these days. The generosity of Kobus, I am going to get a bit up close and personal here, but forgive me for that, or whatever. Kobus, a few days before my husband died, a couple of years ago, Kobus spent an entire Friday with him. He made his slow, difficult way up the very narrow, difficult stairs in our house to the top floor bedroom, another kind of book of rooms, where Matthew lay, and for almost the whole day, the two men shared a still, quiet friendship, where Kobus read. I heard them laugh. There were long periods of silence. I didn't stay in the room, but I will forever be grateful, doesn't even begin to express it, for the time that Kobus spent with Matthew, that kind of generosity of spirit, recognizing a man who needed that kind of friendship right then an intellectual friendship, but also a friendship that was touching and felt and was expressing a kind of masculinity that we don't often find in the world. Kobus is a very generative person, not just generous, but generative. I mean, I think what I find in his work is, again, an openness to range, to ideas. We've seen that, we've heard that in his talk this evening. As a teacher, I mean, I've co-taught an honors course with him, and what I love there is the kind of, the frisson, the spark of surprisingly generative insight that he brought to my own imagination in the space of teaching, and of course in the space of writing. Those of us who write, we know how difficult it can be to share our work with others, that anonymous, who are these others, the putative projected readers, but perhaps sometimes to share your work with another, one person that you trust so deeply, because he can call you out on your SHT, and you can know that you need to take it. There's an unpublished story that I still have. Maybe one day it will see the light of print or air. I shared it with Kobus, and he said to me, Sal, you know, you're taking so long to get to the point. All of this is throat clearing in the beginning. And I felt so terribly hurt and indignant until I got over myself, understanding that this was a generous response, a generative response that was going to move me forward in the writing. I've come to understand through Kobus that we write very differently. I think I am sometimes in the formative spaces quite verbose and voluble, speak too easily, speak too much, rush ahead. Whereas with Kobus, I have learned something of the necessary value of slowness, of stopping, of pausing, of, however difficult it is, going back, stepping back. In my imagination, Kobus is running, flying, leaping, because that is what his work does. Although Kobus will also forever live in my heart mind as the bald head, the egghead always hatching, once the walking stick, smooth-handled, made to walk by upper body strength and broad back and broad-mindedness and strength of mind, the big heart, showing me time like living stone. You can tell that Kobus is incredibly dear to me, and perhaps this is not the kind of response you were expecting to his inaugural lecture. I do have a couple of questions for him, and we will get to those. It's quite strange how writers often keep going over the same kind of ground in their work, and there is in that, I think, also a very generative and germane and generous slowness in recognizing the kind of value in each of our lives that is both he and I. It is both a self and this droll old thing that is made up. And to me, that's one important thing that Kobus has done in his teaching, is working with this notion of the I, of the self, and helping, even me as a colleague, never mind his students, to find the experientially textured value of the life that you are living, whatever shape that life takes, however small that life may be. Because in that smallness, there is also an invitation to pay attention, to give something its due, to accord it a value. I mean, I do think that's very important for us in this country. The other thing about Kobus is the way in which he pays attention to language. Again, he and I are very different kinds of writers. I mean, you will often find in his poems, you know, the foot and the shoe and the mountain and the stone and the house and the horizon. Ostensibly very simple, familiar structures, entities that we think we know. But by the time we have worked through Kobus's writing, we discover how little we know, returning us to that concept he's been working with here of the not knowing, living with the unknown, living with a kind of there's a tautology in being certain that things are actually uncertain, and finding ways as writers, and indeed even those of us who aren't writers, but just in how we live. How do we live with that kind of incongruity, that kind of paradox? Yeah. I walk the dogs every day, and every day I think of Kobus, and that he's not walking there with me, and could he walk with me? And when I stumble, I think of falling, and I think of fall risk, and I think of Kobus. And I find value in that stumbling and in that pause and in that hesitation where I need to stop and not just rush ahead. I think many of us working in institutions of higher education, we are not encouraged to be the slow professor, you know, the book of that name. We do understand that institutions are governed by metrics and productivity and outputs and those kinds of pressures. But actually, as the writers of The Slow Professor indicate, creativity takes time. Thinking, too, is a kind of creativity, even beyond creative writing. It takes time. And institutions, given the way in which they are so connected these days to governments and government funding, can't allow us to take the time we need to take. So in some sense, what Kobus has been speaking of here today is also a reminder of the very power, the potential power of creativity in an institution to encourage an institution gradually, slowly, never be fast, to think and to work differently. Kobus, would it be okay if from here I ask you a couple of questions, just pose a few questions? Okay. So I owe you a lot in my own growth as a writer, my scholarly thinking, for understanding the importance of the draft, the process, the fragment, and that all of these are legitimate forms of a coherence that works through incoherence, and that links to deconstructing our supposed certainties about the known. Can you say a little bit about those kinds of forms? Draft, fragment. I mean, I'm not asking for specific attention to each one, but just instead of the assumed emphasis on the end point, the finished accomplishment. Oh, am I getting you up now, man? Okay.
Very interesting question, Shelley. it's taken me a while to come round to the idea of relishing the unfinished and seeing the value in that which appears to be torn from something else. And in a way, now that you've asked me this question, I can relate it in myself in a philosophical and also biological way to understanding brokenness. So this thing that is perhaps merely a diary fragment has a value because in itself it speaks not in a narrative sense, but it speaks downwards. It's somehow in its fragmentedness, it contains and carries an energy. I'm drawn a lot to, for example, reading work by Kafka, for example. And a lot of Kafka's work is fragmented. It's made up of fragments in his diaries. And I really find tremendous power in that. It teaches me a lot that one doesn't have to always have this finely polished surface, but that the rough edge and the sharp edge in itself contains, that there's, in its brutality, it is conveying something else to the reader, and certainly to me as a reader.
I mean, I like that idea of partly our sense of not knowing, lying not on the smooth surface, the surface that is easy to transverse, to get across, but actually something in the ragged, in the more disaggregated, and that this too is, it's a valid form of coming to know, of bringing knowledge into being. That can be very empowering for a writer.
I think a lot of artist sketches. I love looking at artists' sketchbooks. So you're looking there not at a finished drawing or something, but it's just this quick motion of the hand. And I compare that quick motion of the hand to a literary fragment. Yeah.
Okay. You still can't sit down. If you may not yet sit down. One more. Last one. Okay.
Yeah.
Last one. So, last one. I wanted to speak about the range of reference in your inaugural. Keats and Mary Shelley, but Erin Murray, Hélène Sixou. So, to you, in trying to accept that this knowledge is always going to be processual, what is the role of reading?
Oh.
Why do you bother to read so widely? Isn't reading lame? Isn't it boring? Isn't it so
It's
static?
completely boring. I think we should just give it up. Stop it right now.
Many people have.
I can think of no greater addiction. I have to use that terminology. I'm sorry. If you want to write in whatever form you want to write, you are committed to reading. That's it. Finished. End of story. Don't go past begin. If you don't want to read, then you can't study. It's as simple as that. Don't even go there. I have a daily practice. Before I go to sleep, I read. I try and make space in my day. I read. I write. I read. Reading is my way. Reading is the other side of writing. It's that side. You can't have the one without the other. You cannot have one without the other. And also on a plain, simple note, if I want people to read my work, damn it, I must read other people's work. It's plain giving back to the community.
Okay, thanks, Kobus.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, my friend.
So just to end then, this deeply reciprocal relation between creative writing and creative reading, that these two are inseparable. And I think that's an important recognition for a university institution, where too often, as you said in your inaugural speech, perhaps there is this residual idea, this vague waft about creative writing, just as solipsistic navel-gazing. People tinkering away with their own, facile emotions. No. A reminder that through the writing and the reading together, that you are shaping a workshopping space for this peculiar, mysterious, gnomic, and yet also very practical, 3 steps on the ladder of writing, process of coming to understand and to accept the importance of the institution as a space, not just of magisterial knowledge that is professed, but rather a more elusive, fragmented, incongruous unknowing, which is crucial, not just to creative writing, but in how we respond to people in the world, instead of just fixing definitively on categorizing and siloing, but rather this opening up, which is not easy. Thanks, Kobus.
I'm going to just end it. I would just like to thank the Faculty of Arts for your tremendous, tremendous support in setting this up this evening. I'm not going to mention names. Thank you all. Our new Dean. Thank you, Fiona, and Prof. Khalakhala. Thank you so much for this evening. And to all my colleagues in the department, thank you for your friendship. Thank you to Julia. Okay. Thank you.
Don't go yet.
Oh, sorry.
So as you can see, the hat is
The
also
hat is
too
flying
big. It's
off.
falling off. Okay. I think I should take it off, actually. So just to say that we'd like to thank you as a faculty. We'd like to thank you for your words and your deep thoughts and the emotional experience we have shared with you this evening. And this is just a small token of our appreciation. And a number of years ago, my son had a birthday, and I said to him, "Oh, so what did your granny give you?" He said, "She gave me just an envelope." This is not just an envelope, okay? Open it.
God bless you.
Thank you. Yes, you may. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. Murray, for that engaging response and for bringing love back into the room as well. We really appreciate that. I think one of the things that I'm leaving here with tonight is the certainty of not knowing, and that's okay. So very important. Thank you, Prof. Moolman, once again. To offer the official word of thanks, I'm going to hand over to Prof. Mutanyani. Prof. Mutanyani, please would you come to the podium?
Thank you very much, Prof. Good evening, everyone, colleagues, students, friends, family, Prof. Usually I would say mine is an easiest task, which is to give a vote of thanks. And I know you are very unpredictable, but I didn't think you would be this unpredictable. So you forced us to listen today. So my response, before I give thanks, I won't be very long. is as a result of being a very close friend of one of your students, Nondwe, and colleague. So I got to understand you a little bit from that angle. But I've also heard you mention names, Kevin Soul, Stephen Watson, and a whole lot of others who used to be my lecturers. So you are very familiar in unfamiliar ways through other people. So it's really my honor to extend this heartfelt vote of thanks on this very, very prestigious moment, your inaugural lecture. Tonight we've been privileged for being the witnesses of this unveiling of the inside crystal of things, which you call the difficult imagination. And it was a profound meditation, if I may call it that way. You said we needed to close our eyes and listen, and we don't do that a lot. We don't like listening, but today we were forced to listen. We were forced to see with our ears, so we imagined your presentation, and that was beautiful. So it wasn't only a meditation, but it was also very poetic. It was like the whole presentation was a poem. So it forced us to listen. At the same time, you were actually teaching. So the act of teaching and learning as a creative, ethical, and transformative pursuit, you actually demonstrated that today. So it was a lecture, not just an ordinary lecture. You were actually putting us in spaces where your students usually go. And for that, we thank you for sharing that with us. You have also offered us more than a lecture. You've offered us a lyrical journey into the depths of what it means to write. You started very, very early, very young. You've taught us and opened us to us how to reflect, how to teach, and how to do that with courage. Opening up and being vulnerable. An uncompromising commitment to the unseen. You mentioned a lot, closing eyes, feeling ears, and using the words unseen and unheard. It's really connecting with the institution. In a way, we are often unseen. A lot of people don't see UWC until they come to it. It's usually unheard until you really start listening, and I was one of those people. So your words are not just words. It's the place, it's the culture, it's the people, it's everything. So we cannot thank you enough for this. Your reflection on the pedagogy of poetic practice has reminded us that teaching is not simply about imparting knowledge, and you've said that many times, but about nurturing the space where language can breathe, where silence can speak, and where the body, in all its forms, different forms, can be honored and heard. So your work is really challenging us beyond convention. You said you are unconventional. You are very conventional in your unconventional way. You push us beyond boundaries and beyond the norm. And for that, and I'm speaking for all of us, we are deeply grateful. Thank you for the gift of your voice, Prof. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your dedication to the craft of writing and caring for our learners. Your contribution to South African literature, I remember, was one of the judges on the NIHSS panel. I've seen your work feature many times. So for those who don't know, I'm also a poet on other times. I think I've just revealed that. So with all those, our country is really blessed to have you. Our institution is blessed to have you amongst us. I think your students here, somebody said, we love you, Prof. We really do. We mean that. Your colleagues love you. And your readers, everyone, loves you for what you do. I think I've said more than enough. Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, our deans, Prof. Shelley Murray, family, friends, students, members of the academic leadership, colleagues in the English language studies, the organizing team. How can I forget our team in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, my colleagues, and program director. Thank you for supporting and facilitating this important event. To our guests who have come from far and those who stayed long beyond your usual hours, I didn't see, it's just that I was sitting down, but I could hear nobody sleeping or snoring. So thank you for that. Your presence tonight affirms the importance of celebrating scholarship and creativity in academic spaces. So finally, Prof. Moolman, Kobus, may your words continue to unsettle and inspire, to open up new avenues, and to remind us of the crystal things, which you call the difficult imagination. And that this crystal of things often lies not on the surface, but deep within. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Motaniani. Colleagues, all that is left for me to say is from food for thought to food to our bodies. And prior to us getting there, we do have one last thing, so please could we all rise. And as the academic procession exits the building, please join us for some refreshments in the foyer as well as some photographs. And after the academic procession has exited, we are all welcome to go and join them as well. Thank you so much, and good evening. Follow. Thank you. Enjoy the evening.